Governor Inslee recently proposed a bill that would criminalize political free speech in Washington state. But how likely is it that that would happen? Thank you for watching. My name's Glen Morgan, and this is We the Governed. As always, I like to start out these videos with a quick trigger warning for those who want to realize that nothing I say here has been approved by Governor Inslee's Ministry of COVID Compliance, and therefore this should be a trigger warning to you that if you only want to listen to whatever Governor Inslee wants you to hear, please stop listening right now. Which of course brings us to today's story, which is all part of Governor Inslee's Omicron panic. And I really believe that that's what this is because as people are realizing how foolish and silly this administration has become in Washington state, people are starting to question what exactly is going on. And so, of course, Governor Inslee is responding in a way that is an anagram of Omicron, of course, which is also something that people have talked about, fairly moronic. This is how Governor Inslee does seem to operate. And this leads us right into what has been going on and been in the news quite a bit lately, which was a Seattle Times article that came out. Of course, Inslee made this big deal about how he wants to politicize free speech, and he wants to punish and put people in prison for daring to question the results of elections. And it's an absurd thing that he's trying to do here, but this is what Inslee is all about. It's not like he is the smartest guy out there, and it's not like he's getting necessarily any good political advice. As long as he's kicking back the amount of cash that he needs to his friends and political allies, he's just kind of like a loose guy running around out here with really stupid ideas, and this is one of them because, of course, would Inslee really be willing to jail Al Gore and put him in prison for daring to question the results of the 2000 election? I don't think so, but Al Gore has been traveling around the country for 2 decades claiming that he actually won the 2000 elections. And this is a common statement that has been repeated many times by many Democrat elected officials endlessly and repeatedly all around the country for over 2 decades now. So would Inslee be willing to put these people in prison? Would Inslee be willing to put Stacey Abrams in prison after she lost her race running for governor of Georgia? She claims that she won, actually. And for many years, she has said this on national news. She has said this repeatedly everywhere. And in fact, many other elected officials have had her on stage with them, and they've let her make these claims repeatedly. And so would Governor Inslee, if she actually showed up here in Washington state and made that claim again, would Governor Inslee be willing to put her in prison? For that matter, would Governor Inslee be willing to put almost the entire Democrat leadership, both at the congressional and the legislative level in Washington state, would he be willing to put them in prison for daring to question the results of the 2016 election? I really don't think that's very likely, but that's what his law would do. But of course, if you were to approach Inslee about this, he'll explain this is not really what he means. What he means is he wants to use this law as a way to punish those who he disagrees with. This is intended to punish his political enemies and reward his political friends. How dare you question the election results if a Democrat gets elected? But if a Republican gets elected, that's okay. You can question those election results forever. And in fact, you can sell books about it. You can travel around the country. You can be on the Rachel Maddow show. You can do whatever you want. But how dare you question a Democratic politician if they get elected? This is what Inslee really means with this proposal. Now, why would he be willing to do this? Well, because that's generally how the law has been applied all around him. The rules have not applied to Democrats. They typically are only applied to their political enemies. And case in point is example number 1, Bob Ferguson, who's the Washington State Attorney General. He always uses the law and has since he's got into office as a way to punish political enemies and reward political friends. So you can see it most egregiously and most obviously with the amount of resources that Bob Ferguson has dedicated going after Tim Eyman, for example, for being a citizen initiative guy, breaking campaign finance laws. And what you see is that Bob Ferguson has dedicated more resources going after his claims against Tim Eyman than all other campaign finance violators in the history of the state of Washington combined, because Tim Eyman is a political enemy of Inslee and of Ferguson. And so therefore, spending tens of millions of dollars on this case and going after him and crucifying his family and attacking him in a way that he's never applied the law to any other human in the history of Washington state, this is considered basically the way you do things in Washington. So even though Bob Ferguson is going to pretend and claim that he cares about free speech, the idea is that the rules really don't apply equally. Free speech is only for me, for him and his political friends. It's not going to be for you and I. You and I really don't get the same protections under an Inslee and Ferguson administration. And we see this all over the place. I mean, Inslee claims that everybody should be forced to wear masks, but as we've documented here many times, his staff that are off camera, they aren't wearing masks when the cameras are not on them. And he certainly wouldn't want you to wear this mask. That wouldn't be such a recommendation from the governor. And of course, when we look around, Inslee has basically been able to feel like he can propose foolish legislation like this because nobody's really questioning him. And despite what he thinks, free speech still exists, even if Governor Inslee, the Democratic Party, and the corporate big tech guys wish it did not. And they cannot change the fact that it still actually exists in both the federal and the state constitution. On top of that, there's an endless and just tons of Supreme Court decisions, both at the federal and state level, that also demonstrate that Inslee's proposed law is illegal before he even gets going. And there's so many of these that I'm actually going to link them down below. Because remember, the issue with free speech isn't whether you like it or not, which is what Inslee thinks, and that's what Ferguson thinks, and apparently that's what the Democratic Party thinks. You're not allowed to say anything they don't like, and if they don't like it, they want to make it illegal. So that's their approach to free speech. It's ridiculous, but that's the approach that they have right now. And this bill is one of the stupider ideas that Inslee has come up with, and that's really saying a lot because he comes up with a lot of bad ideas, but that's where it's going. And part of the reason why he feels this way, I found this photo here just recently from last year, early 2021, January. Took a picture outside of the state capitol. Inslee got away with fencing off the state capitol and locking out the citizens and the state legislature from accessing the state capitol for the first time in state history. It's never happened before. And he got away with it. The Republicans had an incredibly anemic and almost useless response to it, and they got away with having this Zoom session where the Democrat Party was able to squander billions of extra dollars, give away money to their friends. The public could not access their political leadership at all. They couldn't see what was going on. These Zoom meetings allowed them to mute most of the people who wanted to testify, allowed them to mute legislators who said things they didn't want to hear, and it prevented the public from knowing exactly who is it behind that Zoom screen. That legislator, when they're looking up, kind of reading the notes on the screen, who's actually telling them what to say? Nobody knows. And Inslee got away with this for the entire session. And it looks like he's going to try to do it again this next session. So why would he think that he couldn't do this? I want to point out something with this effort on free speech restrictions. The state capitol for a while there, early January and February, was actually also trying to push and prevent people from coming on campus and having any kind of a rally or anything else with microphones or with speaker stands or with portable generators or anything like that for the first time in state history as well. That had never been restricted before. And so I wrote an article about that and invited people to come up with me with an explicit goal in February of last year, in 2021, to break this specific application of the law and break that law purposely, willfully, to their face, openly, clearly, because their application of that law was unconstitutional. It was very clear. And when we approached them with that, and when we had the event a few days later, they had to back down because they knew that they were completely wrong. They knew that they were illegal. They knew that what they were doing wouldn't ever pass a smell test. And that's what they had to do then. They had to back down at that point in time. And I only use this as an example because if they're foolish enough to pass some kind of a law that Inslee's proposing, inevitably some kind of result like this is going to happen. Now, I want to point out that Inslee has repeatedly, since 2000, has continually brought up this idea that anybody who dares question him is being insubordinate. And you see it. He specifically came out and said that the early rallies that came out and people were out there opposing the mandate, thousands of people were on the Capitol campus. Inslee said that you were being insubordinate. That is his words. People are being insubordinate, which is entirely not understanding what the role is as a servant of the people, and that's what you are, even if you're elected governor, and even if everybody around you is telling you you're the most important person around, the reality is the people are, and acting like they're being insubordinate for daring to question foolish mandates and ideas that you have is clearly an indication of where you are, where your mentality is, because people still have free speech. They can wear masks like this, as much as Inslee doesn't like it. They can put up billboards like this, as much as Inslee clearly doesn't like it. They can go ahead and express themselves with their Christmas lights on their roof, even if Inslee doesn't like it. And in fact, they can put a sign in the back of their truck and they can drive it all around the state capitol, just like this one here, even if Inslee doesn't like it. So this is something that if they really want to get exotic, they can attach a sky sign behind an airplane and fly it, like this one, right over the Capitol and fly it during a rally, as they did in early 2000, saying this, even if Inslee doesn't like it. Inslee cannot pass a law that's going to make that illegal. Now, of course, Inslee doesn't want to listen. He's going to try to ignore everybody or basically pretend like he doesn't hear you at all, because that is not what he wants to hear. He really wants, in my opinion, I think this is just a big distraction, because as foolish and as stupid as this law is, Inslee doesn't want to hear any kind of criticism. Now, one of the big questions will be, which legislators or state senators are actually ignorant enough and bad enough and corrupt enough to vote for a law like this? And that's a great question. So if this law really seems to get on the calendar and have a committee hearing and get a vote, this is a great way to document some of the worst people that are holding political office in Washington state today. Because as much as Inslee wants to be king, and he's certainly been acting like one for several years, and to be fair, the legislature has done absolutely nothing really to stop him from being that way. And the state Supreme Court, of course, handpicked and appointed mostly by Inslee, is also fairly useless in this category, and that's an unfortunate thing. We're going to end up having to deal with something in pushing back on some of this crazy legislation. One thing I want to point out real quick is that if by some means they actually pass a stupid law like this, and it needs to be challenged, it shouldn't be challenged in state court. It should be challenged in federal court. The state justices, the Supreme Court of Washington state, and most of the judges in Washington state right now are very corrupt when it comes to these issues. They're going to be very deferential to the government. I've been very critical of them and become more critical all along as I see the terrible decisions they repeatedly make. And so this should be something that's challenged at a federal level, where at least there's a chance the judges are honest and this issue can be exposed for what it is. But for that, all I can tell you is that you can't sit back and complain and just think things will be fixed on their own. It requires us to get involved and get engaged, just like we did last year at that rally that I mentioned earlier, where we committed an act of free speech, defying the Department of Enterprise Services in the state to arrest me for daring to actually violate their stupid laws that clearly violated free speech rules. So at this point in time, that's the only way to make a difference. You have to be engaged, you have to be involved, you have to elect better people to office. And that's what I mean when I say that we have to continue to push back. So if you want to learn more, please go down to the comment section and the details. You'll see a lot more information that I've attached there. If you want to learn more at We the Govern, go to wethegovern.com. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with others. And you can also sign up for our free email newsletter. And don't forget, if you want, you can also financially support our efforts here at We the Governed. But no matter what you do, remember, the future belongs to those who show up.